Hello everyone. Today I'll actually be touching on the PTS 0.6.1 changes. This is of course a preview, it's on the test server where I'm testing the upcoming changes and what the update is bringing us. First of all, those that play Royal Navy or have Royal Navy cruisers, Belfast and such, they should be happy that they are actually changing the smoke, the way it works. Now you are guaranteed to get an additional smoke puff at the end of the smoke. Of course, they all said it was working as intended and everything was fine, but now they're actually fixing it, so perhaps once again their claims of it being working as intended weren't perhaps as truthful as some of us might agree. Regardless, they are now fixing it and you will get a guaranteed smoke puff at the end of a smoke. Now, this doesn't actually entirely fix the problem. Well, you no longer have the glitch where you only get one smoke puff, so that part is great. However, there's still the issue with the smoke puff at times arriving around the back or the stern part of your ship, so you might still end up gliding out of smokes you didn't expect to glide out of because, well, the positioning of the additional smoke is worse, but at least it's significantly more consistent and you will no longer fall victim to the one smoke puff death, which was of course extremely aggravating. So thumbs up for Wargaming to manning up and actually fixing that shit, because that was incredibly frustrating. Now, other than that, what they're also adding is these new upgrades, which are actually completely garbage in my opinion. You can see there's a plus here in the upgrade, a special upgrade available. It allows you to change in some new upgrades. For example, instead of the accuracy here, I can instead slot smoke generator modification. Now this smoke generator mod, it reduces the time the smoke lasts by 12%, but it gives plus 30% to the action time. Now the action time of course means how long the smoke actually blooms. So instead of being active for 97 seconds or being active for 20 seconds, it's now active 30% more, so it'll be active for what, 26 seconds. So that's of course great. And that's one of the few upgrades that might have some use in competitive play. If you want to create long smoke corridors, then this one might have some utility there, but overall it's still a minus 12% reduction to the smoke screen duration, and you have to give up one of these upgrades to get it. So in normal play, in random battles, this one is completely useless. There are some others, like here, instead of rudder shift, you can get damage control party. This one of course is also available on the Yamato. You can get this same on the Yamato. You can get the same one. Increases the action time of damage control party. Now this is 40% to the action time of damage control party. So once again, your repair, instead of lasting 10 seconds, you get 40% extra. So it'll last 14 seconds. Now this forces you to either give up your rudder shift, or if you use the reduction in fire chance, you have to give up that one. So a very heavy cost to pay for 4 seconds of additional time on the repair, and it doesn't actually reduce the cooldown of it at all. So this one is of course complete garbage. You give up so much and you gain so extremely little, so there's absolutely no reason I would ever replace one of my previous ones with this. I mean, what the hell? Really? Why would you ever give this up? It's just way too expensive of an upgrade. And this is a recurring theme with many of these upgrades, is that they're simply too expensive. For example, here I'll have to give this one gives me plus 30% to the action time of spotting aircraft. First of all, you shouldn't be using spotting aircraft, and second of all, what you're doing here is you're giving up dispersion for the sake of getting more action time and spotting aircraft. Like, what the hell? Why would anyone ever want this? This is completely useless. And this kind of continues this useless theme. For example, let's go to the Des Moines. We can get additional radar duration, plus 40% to the action time of radar. This is the first consumable, or one of the few that actually seems like it might have use, but you have to give up your most important thing on any cruiser, which is concealment. So this one, once again, maybe, perhaps, very extremely situational in competitive, maybe, but in a random battle I would absolutely never slot this. Like, giving up your concealment for the sake of additional radar time just sounds like suicide, and there's no way I would ever use this one. Here we have, of course, oh, this is the same one, the damage control one. And here we have another one. You can actually slot multiple ones for cruisers to modify multiple things. But first of all, spotting aircraft, of course, useless. And then we have defensive AA. Now this increases the action time of defensive AA by 20%. The problem, of course, is we have to give up our 20% additional AA range to get it. So in order to get longer duration on defensive AA, we're giving up 20% of our range on it. So this is a downgrade. I mean, what the hell? Why would I ever want to slot this? I'm giving up a permanent AA range bonus for the sake of making my consumable last 20% longer. It's horrid. And even slotting this, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be shooting down more planes while it's active, because you're losing out on the range of it. So it's just awful. And 20% to the action time of hydroacoustic search. This one, maybe if you can slot this on German DDs, maybe we want longer hydroacoustic search, because the German DD is the only one where you don't really care about which module you slot here. But on most of the ships, all these upgrades are generally just a waste of space. They're just a waste of a slot. There has been one single upgrade that I have found actually worth using, and that's on the IGN DDs. You can slot this one right here. Instead of using damage control or propulsion steering, these are fairly useless since we're on last stand. You can actually slot engine boost mod 1. Now this increases the action time of engine boost by 50%. So that means instead of having a 2-minute speed boost, you actually gain a 3-minute speed boost. So this is the only upgrade that I've actually found worth using for random battles, and probably competitive if someone actually played IGN DDs in them. So this is the only one the biggest reason why this one is feasible is basically because it's replacing the most useless of the upgrade slots, which is of course the 250k one. So other than that, just very, very underwhelming upgrades. Ultimately, I feel like they should just have added an upgrade slot, like one additional slot where you could choose one of these or something similar, because most of the time you're forced to give up something better to get something inferior, which is of course extremely backwards and makes very little sense. Anyway, since I have covered the Royal Navy smoke fix and its upcoming upgrades, I'll move on to the most interesting part of this 0.6.1 patch, and that's of course the buffs to the United States cruisers. And so a buff that has been a long time coming, and they've actually made a pretty damn good job. Starting off, we have the Des Moines, a ship that I honestly didn't think needed any buffs. What they've done is they've reduced the reload from 6 seconds to 5.5. Now, I've been running some pretty silly builds on PTS. For example, this one I'm showing right now, where I'm using the reload mod instead of the range mod, which puts my reload at a 4.8 seconds, and then I've even running Adrenaline Rush because I love it. So I've been running 4-second reload in some cases on the ship, which is pretty silly, and of course not something I really recommend on live because the range mod is so important. Ultimately though, I didn't really see the need for a buff to the Des Moines because I already considered the ship extremely strong, and it was pretty hard to play, but the buff doesn't really change much. The half a second doesn't really change the way it's played in any way. It's still pretty much the same ship, it just has slightly higher damage potential than it did before. I mean, sure, why not? It's honestly, this is probably the least influential or change of this patch regarding the US cruisers. They buffed the Des Moines a bit, not a ship that needed it, but whatever, it got a small increase. It has the slowest arc, so maybe it can benefit a bit from it, but ultimately not really gonna affect people much at all. In fact, most people would probably not even notice it unless it was specifically mentioned there, because considering the half a second, it takes you need to shoot plenty of shells for it to add up. The Baltimore, however, has gotten a significant increase. They've changed the reload on the upgraded guns from 13 seconds to 10 seconds. Now that is a massive increase in reload, and probably one of the biggest pure reload buffs I've seen in the game in all the time I've been playing it. Now the Baltimore has of course been a bit of a red-headed stepchild regarding many people really disliked it. I kinda liked it, and ultimately I did want them to buff the reload on the ship because that's what it really needed, but I was expecting something around 1.5, maybe 2 second reload buff, but they went full for the 3 second reload. Now of course that makes the reload 10 seconds, and when you add the reload mod that I like using on the Baltimore because it has such great concealment, you get an 8.8 second reload on a tier 9 cruiser. Combine it with Adrenaline Rush, which I'm running here, and you can see just how fast my reload is. In fact, I'm fighting demons here, giving too much broadside, just like any US cruiser, you eat a ton of damage, but you can see just how quickly my guns reload and just how much damage the ship is able to pump out now, because you can get the reload down to below 8 seconds with Adrenaline Rush, so calling it a tier 9 Des Moines is actually surprisingly accurate now. So any people who are leveling the US cruiser line and got stuck on the Baltimore, or in general have the Baltimore right now, you should be extremely happy because this buff is really changing the way the Baltimore is being played. The New Orleans also received a similar buff, not nearly as extreme however. The reload was changed from 14 seconds to 12. So actually it's pretty interesting actually, if you go from the upgraded New Orleans to the Baltimore now, you actually lose some reload because you go from the 12-second reload to the stock Baltimore, which is 13, but then of course when you upgrade the guns you get back up, and when you get the 3 million upgrade you also get higher. So this change on the New Orleans isn't nearly as significant as the one on the Baltimore. However, going from 14 seconds to 12 seconds is always nice. It's a much needed upgrade in general because the New Orleans was never really a damage powerhouse, and getting slightly better DPM is pretty nice on it. It still plays very much the same, however, you mostly want to angle because the ship is quite tanky while angled, extremely squishy when showing broadside. And one of the questions I was asked, do you think this will make it more attractive in the competitive meta? Do you think it's going to be used in competitive gameplay now? And my answer is honestly no. The fundamental reasons for running the Chapayev in competitive have always been the longer range radar, meaning you can use it from safer positions, and in general you can cover larger areas and so forth, and some maps you can't even reach the whole cap with the New Orleans radar. So the radar alone already makes the Chapayev more attractive, but there's also the lack of range that the New Orleans has compared to the Chapayev. The Chapayev can of course spam from significantly longer ranges and in that way be more effective. So while the New Orleans, the buff makes it much more comfortable to play in random battles, as of course the increased reload synergizes really well with the long radar duration. Ultimately it's really not going to see much competitive play anyway, because well, the fundamental issues are still there. But the buff was welcome and it's a good change, and I like the fact that Wargaming did it because well, the New Orleans is another ship that hasn't really seen too much action, and with the introduction of many strong premiums like Atago and Kutuzov and such, it's good that it's gotten finally some attention, because this ship has been craving it for a while. So once again, I applaud Wargaming. Good design decision, or good change, even though personally I thought this change could have come a lot sooner, but hey, better late than never, especially for people who haven't yet played the US Cruiser line, because well, they get to enjoy it, a much more enjoyable line overall. The Pensacola has also received a significant buff. Not in reload however, but in concealment. They've actually reduced the concealment to 12.78 km, and that means of course if you run concealment expert and you run the camo, you can get it now to a 10.9 km stealth. Now that doesn't really change how the ship is played, of course. The AP, as you can see right here, it's still amazing. The AP is one of the strengths of this ship, but you are able to play a bit more stealthy, and in general your role of ambushing enemy cruisers is much better because well, you can pop out, you can shoot from 11 km without being spotted, and you can surprise enemy cruisers showing a broadside. So that's fantastic. Once again though, I've been asked, do you think this means the Pensacola will see competitive play? And the answer is still no, because the fundamental issue of the Pensacola still remains. Even though you're not spotted as easily when you fire, you're of course spotted in this ship, and the biggest issue it really has is that well, you can be very well angled, you can be far away, you can think you're fairly safe, but somehow magically shells coming your way will always end up being a citadel, often multiple ones. As we can see here, you see how angled I am. I was full HP and now I'm down to what? Oh, pretty much almost dead. And this fundamental reason is why the Pensacola will, of course, in my opinion, not see much or have much attention in ranked. Concealment is great, but well, it's still a paper ship. Anyway, that was my patch preview. I hope you guys enjoyed it.